In this video, I'm going to walk you through an example of how to categorize product costs versus period costs. Now, it'll help you the most if you take a minute and download the question that we're going to be working on together, print it out, and then fill out the answers by hand as I go through it with you to help you retain the material. So before we go any further, make sure that you download this file, print it out, have it in hand, and then we'll get started. In this question, we need to do a few different things. The first is to identify each of these costs in the category column as either product or period. We also need to identify for our product costs if they are direct materials, direct labor, or manufacturing overhead. That's what the MOH is for. After that, we're ready to go down to the bottom and compute some totals down here, total product costs, total period costs, and then we'll talk about calculating prime and conversion costs. So let's get started with step one, which is to categorize each cost on the table. First cost is depreciation on the factory. Now the keyword here is factory. Whenever you see a cost that says factory, then you can automatically assume that it is a product cost because it relates to production of the inventory. So now that we know it's a product cost, we need to identify what type. Depreciation falls under manufacturing overhead. That's what the MOH stands for. And specifically, it would fall under other manufacturing overhead costs, things that relate to the entire factory facility. Now we'll go to the next one, assembly line wages. The keyword here is assembly line. Because if something happens in the assembly line, then we know it is part of production. So we will identify this as a product cost. Since it's assembly line wages, we know that it is part of our direct labor cost, so DL for direct labor. Now let's go to the next one, plant supervisor wages. The keyword here is plant. Since these wages occur in the plant, that means they have to be one of our product costs. Now the supervisor works in the factory but is not on the assembly line, so that is what we call indirect labor, which is part of manufacturing overhead. So overhead, and then I will put IL for indirect labor. Now let's go to our next item, assembly line health insurance. So here the keywords are assembly worker, because that has identified this cost as relating to factory production. So it's going to be a product cost. Specifically, it would be direct labor because it is part of our assembly line cost of workers. Next, we have property taxes on the factory. The keyword here is factory. Because these taxes are for the factory, we know that they are a product cost. Specifically, costs that relate to the entire production facility go into manufacturing overhead, into the category of other overhead. Next, we have sales commissions. Sales commissions do not happen in the factory or relate to the factory, so they are a period cost. Maintenance on the delivery trucks. Now the key here is delivery trucks. Since the delivery trucks do not relate to production, they are not product costs, they are period costs. Property tax on the administration building. The key here is administration. If a cost is related to administration, it is not production related, so therefore would be a period cost. Indirect materials. Indirect materials are part of our production cost, so that's a product cost. The type of product cost is manufacturing overhead, and then it would fall into its own category, indirect materials. Advertising costs. Advertising does not relate to the factory, does not happen in the factory, so it is a period cost. Depreciation on the sales office furniture. Now your key here is sales office. Nothing relating to the sales office is ever a product cost, so this is a period cost. Utilities for the admin building. The keyword here is admin. If it's relating to administration, it is not production related, so therefore this will be also a period cost. Plant janitor wages. The key here is plant. Anyone who works in the plant is a product cost, the cost of their labor. But since the plant janitor does not work on the assembly line, that labor is part of overhead, specifically indirect labor. Vehicle engines. Now for this one, we need to look and see what kind of a company we're talking about here. And in this example, we are talking about a motor company. So we're building vehicles. So since we are building vehicles, the engines would be one of our components for our inventory. So that is going to be a product cost. And an engine is an expensive component that is easy to track. So that would be part of our DM direct materials. Last one, warranty repairs. Warranty repairs aren't part of our initial production costs. They are costs that occur as a result of products that are ultimately returned. So those are not considered part of production, and those will be period costs as well. So we've completed step one, which was to assign each cost to the correct category. Now we can go down to the bottom and work on our totals. So our first task is to compute total product costs. I'm going to shade all of the product costs in yellow. Add these costs up and you get $207,550. Now let's do the same thing for period costs. I'm going to mark all these with a little green shading. Add these up to get $79,400. Now let's talk about prime and conversion costs. These are additional subtotals that you need to know how to calculate. Luckily, the formulas are pretty simple. To calculate total prime costs, you're simply going to take your total direct materials plus your total direct labor. And to calculate conversion costs, you're going to take total direct labor and add it to total manufacturing overhead. So we need to go back up to our items that we have identified as product costs, and we need to separate them out between the three types of product costs. So I'm going to highlight all of the overheads one color, the direct materials one color, and the direct labor another color. Now that we've separated our product costs into the three types, now we can calculate our total prime costs, direct materials plus direct labor of $61,500, and on conversion costs, direct labor plus overhead, that will give us $192,050. And now we have completed our practice on separating product and period costs.